Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. We welcome Dr. Doreen Grampichet.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for being here.
Always a pleasure.
It's our pleasure. We'd like to remind everybody, in case they have not seen the show before, in case you haven't heard, I don't know where you've been, but Dr. Doreen Grampichet is a true expert in the field of autism. I believe the preeminent expert in the field of autism.
Thank you, Sharon.
She is also a visionary in this field, recognizing the changes that come as we see things have changed significantly in the field of autism in the last few years. They continue to change. She helps us not only to understand what's happening, but to see things coming around the bend that maybe we can't foresee.
I hope so.
You do. You are a visionary in this field, and we are in your gratitude. We love that you
so
spend this hour with us answering people's questions in this format. We do want to remind everybody that even an expert of your caliber, in fact, there is no expert who can answer individual specific advice in this format.
Right.
It would be a disservice to the individual on the spectrum to think that one quick question could really tell us what's going on with them. But having said that, Dr. Grampichet gives us directions, things to look at, questions to ask, information to know when we're asking our questions, so that we don't have to start in a dark room to find the answers.
Just guidance and some advice. Yes,
Yes,
that's right.
absolutely. So we so appreciate you doing that.
It's a pleasure.
And a reminder to all of you that you can be writing in on the live feature. In fact, the first question I want to go to is one that just came in.
Great.
Hi, Dr. Doreen and Shannon. My question today is how to stop vocal stereotypy. My son is almost 5 and he says things that don't make sense or just repeat what he heard on a movie over and over again. What is the best way to help him stop this behavior? Thank you so much, as always. And I didn't give you paper or pen
No problem.
today.
I just need to write some things.
Okay, so vocal stereotypy, he's almost 5. He says things that don't make sense. Sometimes we call that silly talk. Or just repeats what he heard on a movie over and over and over again, and sometimes we call that movie talk. What is the best way to help him stop this behavior? And thank you so much, as always.
That's a great question, and let's talk about that right now. So, like any other behavior, we always want to kind of try to figure out what is the function of the behavior so that we can intervene appropriately. I find that when our kids when they say things that don't necessarily fit into the current time, so they're not appropriate conversational, they are still trying to communicate. I don't think that I'm one of those rare behavior analysts who doesn't think that the automatic function actually exists. I think everything has a function. And I think that when a child repeats things that are either movie talk or things that don't make sense, they actually are trying to establish some form of communication. So there's different functions, I think, for each one. A lot of times I find when a child says something, they are intending it the way they saw it in the movie, but they don't know how to apply it to the current conversation. So one of the things we used to do in the old days, and it's still pretty effective, is if it's slightly off, so let's say the child will say something and it sounds like, I'll just give an example. Like, for instance, the child will say, my backpack is red, or something like that. And it's completely out of nowhere, and you're like, okay, you recognize it, that it's out of something they watched last night. Then the way to make that fit would be like any other child would actually say, they'll have a thought. A typically developing child will have a thought, but the difference is they'll introduce the thought. So they'll say, last night I was watching, TV, and I saw this show, and this kid in this show had a red backpack. And then it's totally fine because they've given an introduction to their thought. But with our kids, there's no introduction. They just blurt out something they've thought of or has come back into their mind from something they saw previously. And then it's very important to give it an introduction. So wherever possible, you want to try to give that utterance an introduction and teach your child to use the introduction prior to saying the utterance. And wherever it is not possible right now, you just want to ignore that comment and then start conversation of a different type or redirect to other types of conversation. it's difficult, you know, a lot of times it's very difficult for our kids because all they're doing is trying to communicate. Like, it's funny, the example I've given on this show actually before is that when I was very little, my mom says that I used to have these books and I would just write. And I didn't know how to write, right? So when you look at these books, they were just scribbles. But I saw other people writing and I wanted to be like them. And so I would have notebooks, many, one after another, filled with just scribbles because I felt, I don't know, like I'm sitting and writing. And I think sometimes our kids try to do that. They hear language and they don't really comprehend the meaning of language or the fact that it involves turn-taking and sharing of information and all that sort of stuff. Plus, our kids often have the theory of mind deficit, so they think whatever they're thinking, you're thinking.
Right.
So they will just utter things that come into their mind, and it makes no sense. And I think it's more appropriate to try to frame it and try to teach them to frame it rather than to eliminate it. Because I think if nothing else, even if it's not, you know, you can't place it from last night's film, I think it still has communicative intent. I think children make utterances because they're trying to communicate. They just don't understand that what they're saying is inappropriate to the context.
Absolutely. Have you had an opportunity yet to see Life animated?
No, and you keep telling me I should. Yes.
Okay, no, we have to make sure that you get a chance to
That's
screen
right.
it. And for those of you who are watching, and for this mom in particular, I really want to encourage you to see this film. It's a documentary, and there are showings of it. Look up to see if there's an opportunity to see it close to you. I think it'll be very quickly on something like Netflix. But it is a documentary about the Susskind family and their son Owen, who is on the autism spectrum, and as a child he regressed into autism and then became so into Disney videos, and that's all he ever wanted to watch, and the only things he would ever say sounded like gibberish to the family. They couldn't, they didn't understand, and every once in a while, like a little phrase from a Disney film would come out, but there's a moment in that film when it all started to make sense to the family, when they realized that there was a quote that he was saying from a Disney movie that applied to what was happening.
Right.
And in such a profound way that I still get chills thinking about it, that they were like, oh my goodness, that it was a way in to this young man that they saw that not only did he see and hear and understand what was happening around him, but he understood it in a level that was almost symbolic.
Yes.
That he could take his world from Disney and apply the symbols from that to say, this is like this and put them together.
Right, that's right.
And it's mind-blowing when you think about, you know, how much intelligence
how profound
that
it is,
takes.
Absolutely.
And so the family then saw this as a way in and started using the Disney videos to get him to the point where he's fully verbal and now living on his own. And
that's amazing.
An adult.
Amazing.
So it's a very exciting, and it's funny because I think they started out to make a movie just about Owen communicating with Disney films, but because he was at a point in his life where he was transitioning to living alone, it really became about how do we help Owen to live alone, and here's the backstory. But it's worth it for both of those things.
That's awesome.
It's
That's amazing.
Really lovely.
That's amazing.
And we have had Cornelia Susskind on the show, the mom. She's an amazing mom. The whole family is, and I think people get excited because the dad, once I think he felt he's a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, and I think he felt a little removed, like he didn't know what to do, and we see that with the dads a lot. But once he saw this,
he got involved.
He got so involved,
yes.
And the mom very, very intelligently went, "Okay, Ron, you're in charge of this. This is your in," and it was his in to
That's
his
amazing.
child, and
That's
it's a great film. Want to encourage because it will make you look at some of the silly talk and some of the movie speak in a different way.
Meaning. Yes,
in a different
absolutely.
way. I think it'll expand. But and we've talked a little bit about though how to minimize it so that it isn't constant.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of redirecting it until you have the way to make it more appropriate to the environment. You know, like, and as you said, and what this movie I think teaches, which is really important, is that sometimes the kids are saying something, we can't place it, so we think it's inappropriate, but again, if there was an appropriate introduction,
Right.
you know,
It
this
would be.
reminds me of,
Exactly.
and then the rest of it you can say.
It would all
It's
tumble.
all about introducing the conversation appropriately.
Yes, absolutely. All right, I love that, and love that we got to do a plug for Life Animated. Make sure
Yes.
that you take a chance and see it. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to be back with some questions about skills that you guys had from last week, so stick with us.
I'm very excited to be here at Denim & Diamonds. This is a fantastic night, supported by so many incredible people, and to see the kind of change and the kind of help that's being given.
It's kind of like going to the Oscars, and it's just been growing ever since, and we're overwhelmed at the support from the community.
I first want to thank everybody for coming out and really helping this Denims and Diamonds fundraiser, because autism has affected so many people, and the work that they've been doing is just off the charts and just wonderful.
As a mom, I'm grateful that I was managed to get the intervention for my daughter when she was young. So it's important to see that all kids can get the same type of intervention.
You with the side eyes, don't be discouraged, oh I realize it's hard to take courage in.
We're just thrilled to be able to raise funds for things that are so vital, you know, like safety equipment, helmets, or fences so the kids don't run away, or iPads so they can learn to communicate.
There's still so much more to do, and we're here to lend our little hand and make this thing a global thing.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet, and she is answering your questions in real time. I wanted to pause and go back. At the end of the program last week, we always get questions where people are asking about help and support that they can do on their own, or how to do something when there aren't services by them. And a lot of the questions that we have this week are about people wanting services in different places. And one of the things that comes up frequently on the show is that there is something called skills that people can be using. It is, somebody wrote in and said, it sounds amazing. I'm here to say you're absolutely right that it is amazing. First time I saw it, I thought the top of my head was going to blow off. I was so excited I shook for 2 hours. I mean that sincerely. I posted on Facebook about it.
That's crazy.
I pulled out of the card office after you introduced it to a bunch of us that were there in your conference room. I'm still grateful that I got to be there that day. That was the first day that I met Dr. Graham-Pichet. And
it was in such the early phases of skills.
It
at
really
that
was,
point,
but
yeah.
but the whole concept
The
of
content
it
was there, yes.
It was so exciting to me that I left. I came out of the parking garage and I started to go towards the freeway. And there's a parking lot right next to the old card office where there's a Ross there.
Yeah.
I had to pull in there because I couldn't get on the freeway. And I called my husband and I said, I just saw something so amazing. I can't drive. That's how excited I was.
amazing.
It's so amazing.
Gosh.
And it's only gotten better since then and
Yes.
become a reality that people are using. So the question that somebody wrote in and said, do all card clients get skills? So let's start with talking about that.
Yeah, they do. It's part of our database, essentially. So the way that it works here at CARD is that when you come in for intake, like when you become a new patient, you start with filling out the skills assessment, and that actually gives us a pretty valid, deep look into your child's capabilities. And that's really important because we don't have time We don't want to focus on the wrong things. We want to be able to focus on what your child needs and really only what your child needs, because when we are doing things that are not that important, we're wasting your child's time. And so skills helps us. It's a series of yes/no questions, a few thousand. But you only get questions based on your child's age. So a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old will not get the questions that an 8-year-old will get. And as your child ages, you get additional questions over time. But the questions are just yes and no. Can your child do this? Can your child do that? And you say yes or no. And if sometimes it gets pretty intricate and delicate, and so there's examples, and you can look at the example, and then that'll help you decide if your child can or cannot do it. You say yes or no. If you say I don't know, the question goes into a probe pile. So it's kind of like a place where we reserve all the ones that you don't know, and then a supervisor here will test those items. But generally, if you say, yes, my child can do it, it goes in a mastered pile. And if you say my child can't do it, it'll go in the to teach pile. And not only will it go into the to teach pile, but everything that is a kind of related to that skill or harder versions of that skill will go into the to teach pile. And then that list of things to teach is your general supermarket of items, and then you essentially will select, let's say 10 or 20 items from your entire thing, and it'll take you to the easiest. It'll tell you what the prerequisites are and so on. So just as an example, let's say you say that your child cannot, doesn't know how to identify actions, like people running, jumping, and so on and so forth. And you say that your child can't identify, it'll ask you more questions, like it'll say, if your child sees a picture of someone running, will they be able to say she's running? And you'll say no. The system will right away know that your child doesn't have actions expressively, and then it'll start asking you questions about whether your child knows actions receptively. Right. So can your child touch a picture of someone running, etc. And it'll identify that perhaps your child doesn't know pronouns, because she is running or he is running, and then it'll ask you, does your child know pronouns, and can they identify those personal pronouns or even possessive pronouns? And then it'll also ask you about present tense, because that's kind of part of the question as well. So it generates more questions and asks you a whole bunch of stuff, and then it identifies all those things, and everything your child cannot do will then link to the lesson on how to teach it. So if you say, you want to do receptive actions, then it'll take you to that lesson, and it'll take you through the entire series of steps for teaching receptive actions, expressive actions, pronouns, prepositions, whatever it is your child needs. And it's across the board in all areas of functioning we could think of. And they are obviously language, social skills, play skills, adaptive skills, academic skills, motor skills, cognitive skills, and executive functions. So that's the 8 domains. So pretty much everything, I think, we didn't leave anything out. They cross-reference each other, those domains, and there's hundreds and hundreds of lessons within those domains, and it'll take you step by step and teach you how to teach those skills to your child. And the reason we use it as CARD is that all of that is loaded, that's our curriculum, and it's loaded into our individual iPads. So when you answer these questions, every lesson that is appropriate for your child is pushed to the iPad of the therapists who work with your child. So a therapist who works with your child will not have access to lessons from another child. They will have access to lessons for your child, current lessons for your child, and they're pushed to their iPad. Now, on their iPad, they have to teach it, so they have to keep track of whether or not your child is mastering this, what the prompts are, what accompanying behaviors are, yes or no, did he master, etc., what operants are. So, let's say I'm teaching colors as a lesson. All the operants of colors would be all the various colors, so each one is taught individually. So that's all tracked on their iPads, and then that's pushed back to your child's database. So our central database has data that contains your child's information on learning, acquisition, and that goes from their iPads. So, and that is the backside of skills. So, you know, like for parents, I find skills is incredibly useful because although I often tell my supervisors to show and share skills with the parents because it is so important for parents to actually see what is going on. It gives you a bigger picture too. Like you can see all these graphs and it shows you where your child is stuck or where they're doing really well and what things are left. And I think that's in itself very valuable.
Absolutely. The thing that I always say is you go to the mall, right? And you want to know where a store is. And you walk up to that map that says,
right.
You are here.
Right.
And then you're able to see, oh, where I want to get to is here.
Right.
So the path I'm going to take is this way, right?
That's right.
How much in autism do we as parents want that map?
Right.
And Skills gives it to us in one fell swoop. You don't. If you do the assessment, you have that map. It is right there. It says you are here, and then you get to decide where you want to go, and it will give you all the steps to get there.
That's such a great way to put it. I've never thought of it that way, but that's essentially what it is. It tells you what lies ahead in the next few years. And then on the backside, for me, what's very exciting about Skills is now if I want to, it's funny because we used to, whenever I see a patient, and I see patients like that I haven't seen for 6 months, right? So when I see a patient and they're coming in to see me, in the past I always used to get these lengthy narrative reports from the supervisor prior to seeing the patient so I could be caught up.
Right.
And I'd be reading all this stuff and I'd say, okay, these are the issues, and I'd make my own notes just like I do here.
Right.
Just so that I'm not, when I see the patient, I know them a little bit and I'm reminded of what their issues are. Now, when I meet with supervisors prior to, the supervisor comes when they bring their patient to me. And prior to that, now, the other day I was asking a supervisor and they were like, well, why don't you just pull up their skills account?
Right.
And a lot of times that's what we do now. It's like, can you just look at my skills account? And I'll pull in and look at a child's skills account. And I can see everything. Like I can see not just the current lessons, but I can see their rate of learning, which I think is incredibly important. And I can see medications the child is taking, how they're affecting the rate of learning. I can see any environmental changes, dietary, move, new school, you name it. I can see challenging behaviors on all the rates of all the behaviors. I can flip through them. I can put them on top of each other. Everything is there. It's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. And I want to go back to, somebody asks, do card clients get Skills? Yes. If you're a card client, you get that. It is of no charge to you. It's used for your child. And just recently, less than a month ago, we had Evelyn Kung come and do a webinar here that it exists on our YouTube page. And it isn't, there's no like access code that you have to have. Anybody can go and look at it, but it was specifically designed to be a webinar for parents who are card clients, for them to know how they can utilize Skills on their own,
right?
To look things up, and you know, she is amazing, and she goes through the whole thing and says, you know, click this button and that will give you this graph.
Right.
So that's available. It's on our YouTube channel.
That's great.
But that is specifically meant for parents who are using Skills as card clients.
Right.
But we do need to say that if you are not a card client and you want to utilize Skills because you have an ABA provider that is not card and you would like for them to be using Skills, you can.
Yes, absolutely.
You absolutely can. And you can go to them, or you can go to Skills, and you can say to them, do you want to get this for all of your clients? And they have a special rate for that. That's a group rate. Your school can use it. There are many schools that are out there that are using Skills, not in conjunction with card. So it exists on its own. And even within that, Skills exists in a couple of different ways, because the thing about Skills that's amazing is that it does so many things. So there's the assessment, right? And that is of its own personal use. I say to parents, if nothing else, take and do the assessment, because when it becomes IEP time, it's going to be your very best friend.
Yes.
It's going to help you to be ready for your IEP in a way that you have never been ready for your IEP before,
true.
right?
Yes.
So there's that. Then there's the whole curriculum, which is if you are having to design a program on your own or have volunteers come in, or even if you're with an ABA provider that's not CARD, having that curriculum, which is science-based, proven over decades, amazing, right? But then there's another component to it that we haven't even talked about, which is the BIP builder.
Right.
So anybody who has a child, every school should have this BIP builder.
It's so true.
Because what it does is it is a drop-down menu that doesn't allow you to do a BIP, which is a behavior intervention plan that is not science-based.
Right.
And so it has places where you can fill things in and customize it, but it has cautionary things that come up and say, this is, the intervention that you've put in is not proven to be scientifically effective for this behavior.
That's right.
So it says, step back, rethink this. Would you like one of these? Or, but you can totally customize it. It would save schools thousands of dollars. And their BIPs would be more effective.
That's right. And it's so easy. The BIP builder just asks you about the behavior and very easily helps you establish the function and the treatment for it.
When it first came out, and I didn't quite know how to use it, my son had a BIP that the school psychologist gave us. And I said, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to plug in what they did to the BIP. And the warning came up and said, why are you doing this for this? And I was like, well, now, and I wouldn't have thought of that.
That's so interesting.
Like, my head doesn't work that way. But I went, oh, no, that's entirely true. Because I had plugged in the function that she had put in, that it was attention-based. And so what it was giving me to do was going to feed into it, but I had not seen that until the BIP builder said, warning.
You're giving attention to an attention-focused
And I went back into my IEP and said, why are we doing this? And they went, oh, no, we'll get a new BIP.
That's so funny. That's amazing.
Right? And I went, oh, I'm an equal member of this team now. I was so empowered by that.
Yes,
and definitely. I know people that are paying for educational consultants and advocates.
It's so important.
And paying so much money. And the thing about Skills is that it's a subscription. It's a monthly subscription.
Right.
If you are a single entity for a single person, there is a price for it that I think is around $75 a month.
Right.
If you are a school or an entity that has a group of people, there is a discounted rate for groups.
That's right.
And I would say any parent that's out there that is like, oh my gosh, okay, $75 is not in my budget, and I feel you pain, been there, done that. I just want to let you know that Autism Care and Treatment Today is an organization that gives grants, and you can absolutely apply for a grant and say, I really would like to use this, and I just can't afford it. And, and they have given many grants for Skills. They love to give them because it is one of the most effective,
efficient,
and really, low cost.
Right, low cost.
Because they can give tons of grants for Skills.
Absolutely.
It's so, they can give hundreds of grants for Skills where one fence it costs more than hundreds of grants for Skills. So if you're saying, I just can't do it because of the cost, don't have shame about that. Fill out a grant application and let them know in the letter, I want Skills because, and it used to be that for parents, it was a little overwhelming finding your way through.
Yes.
But now they have somebody who is there to help, walk you through. So
we have a parent,
amazing,
right?
An amazing young woman. So
and we have a couple of different versions of the assessment now. We have sort of a shortened assessment, which doesn't overwhelm you.
And that's true. And for those of you who have older kids who are on the spectrum, if you don't need the whole of Skills, you can, I hope this is true because I know it was true for a while, that you can just buy the section of Skills that you need for a reduced price. It's executive functions, social skills, cognitive.
That's right. And a nice, EF, cognitive, and social, I think. Those are the three.
I think so.
Yeah.
So anyway, let me tell you where you can go. www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call their 800 number, which is 877-975 4559. It really is amazing, and I use it all the time.
That's great.
And the other thing that I did early on is that I because I was coming to work here and do this, I read through skills, which you can do as you're going through
it's a
things.
lot.
I read through it, and it's amazing. Now you could do that with skills, but the things that are in skills are in the card book.
Yeah, they
And
are.
if you
That's
want it
right.
in a book form,
That's
then
right.
I would encourage
Although
you.
they're not as detailed, obviously, that we don't go into, but all the areas are listed, but we don't. There's not enough space, right? I mean,
Right.
when we originally wrote skills, it was 8-inch binders, like they were massive, so it's several thousand lessons. So we listed all the lessons, but not the description of the lessons in the book.
There you go.
yeah.
So you could do that either way.
Right.
But I always say with skills, don't try to tackle the whole thing at once. What do you need right now? And then just use skills for that. If you're having challenging behavior, or especially challenging behavior at school, go into the BIP builder.
Absolutely.
If you don't know where you are and no one has given you a snapshot of where your child is, take a couple
Take
of
the
weeks
assessment, that's
and do
right.
the assessment.
That's
and take
right.
a couple of weeks to do it, because there are times you're going to get overwhelmed.
That's right. Spread it out. It's very long.
I kind of wanted, when they were changing the assessment, I kind of wanted it to every once in a while say, okay, and now you need to take a break and go have a glass of wine.
Honestly,
to pop up.
because it is so long, it's so lengthy. But
Yeah.
it's a very
It's worth
difficult.
it.
I always tell parents, like at the beginning, I apologize that it's so long, but we're very obsessive about getting to know our kids. Even with skills, I still need, before I can really heavily get engaged with a child and involved, I need like a week of spending one-on-one time with them so that I can understand how they function.
But that's because you do individual based.
We really do,
treatment.
and that's what it's supposed to be, because
Yes.
like you have, not only do the kids, obviously, as you know, Shannon, have a huge, wide array of skills and deficit areas, but they all respond to the world differently. They have different learning, but just like us, but even more so. Like some of the kids are extremely visual, some of them are not at all visual. Some of them are reinforced by things like touch, and others hate it. So it's completely different. You have to get to know the children and the adults before you can actually do this work.
Absolutely. We've got a bunch of questions that came in. The
Great.
first one is, what's the movie title from before? It's Life Animated is the name of that movie that we were talking about first. The next one, somebody says, thanks for talking about skills. If child is able to have the skill while attentive, should the question be answered yes or no? In other words, the child is capable, but sometimes has no focus. This is a great question. Is there a place in skills that identifies focus issues? And thank you. And then we
Yes.
have more questions, but we'll answer that one first.
Yes, so very good question. And to be safe, I would say no, because when you say no, that lesson goes into your pool of things to teach. And then, of course, if it's easy for your child to master, don't worry, because they'll master it immediately and it'll be gone. But in order for it to remain in your overall pool, then say, no, my child cannot do it. Now, secondly, to answer your other question about attention, yes, there's an attention section under the executive functioning curriculum, and it has several lessons and many questions regarding attention, short-term, long-term, working, like there's so many different, attending to 2 stimuli at the same time, attending to background. I mean, there's millions of questions, so you'll have fun with attention.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
mind-blowing how good it is.
And a lot of activities, like we will teach you saliency and how to teach your child to attend to the most important things. There's a lot of different lessons you can have on attention. They're fun.
So here's another great question. Hi, Shannon. Does insurance pay for skills? We are in California, and thank you for all the information.
Yeah, they don't. They should. For a while they did. Like Magellan actually licensed skills for 5,000 users. That contract ran out, and after 3 years they used skills. So if you had been a Magellan user during that time, you would have accessed skills. But unfortunately, they don't. I don't know if our skills department is working with various insurance companies. I think they think it is part of the provider's obligation to have a good curriculum and to use this curriculum. So I don't think they do at this point. You can always ask your insurance, because obviously it's a lot cheaper, and this is what they would pay. 1 month of skills, and if it's an insurance company, obviously the price drops pretty significantly because they have very large numbers of users.
Right.
Is nothing. It's less than an hour of therapy, or the cost of an hour of therapy. So
For a month, yeah.
Yeah, for a whole month of access.
I do know that one of the things that the skills folks have been doing and looking at is that there are a large number of companies that are large and have self-funded insurance where they're not covering ABA, and they have gone to some of those companies and made arrangements for them to. The company will gift skills to their workers.
See, that's
so
fantastic.
depending on I would ask
Where you
your
work, yeah.
yes, your HR department, if they are if they have a self-funded plan, if they are giving skills to families that have a child with autism.
Right.
Because there are more and more of them that Skills has identified and made contracts with them so that they could offer that to their people. Because Skills is looking at, if you have an ABA provider, then it would be your ABA provider who would want to get skills. If you have
Right.
a card, you already have it, but it's those folks that don't have anything that
Right.
they're really trying to find a way to help those. So talk to if you have self-funded insurance, definitely talk to them about that. The next question, dear Dr. Doreen, does Skills identify and work with sensory issues, comprehension, theory of mind? After the assessment, how many hours do we need to work the child? And thank you.
Both of those are fantastic questions.
Yes.
So, I'm very big into sensory issues. There's a section in the motor curriculum which asks a lot of questions about how the child's sensory input, so that we can identify things like visual deficits or auditory and so on and work on those. But having said that, they're content areas, and they're not. You can't get to the point of how a child learns. So in other words, for me, Skills will definitely identify if your child needs more work on, let's say, visual stimuli or learning things through listening, that kind of stuff. But it won't identify your child's modality of learning, which I think is really important. And a provider has to be able to identify that. Like, is this a child who learns better when visual stimuli are presented? If you identify that, if you figure that out, then Skills will give you an option for visual kids. It'll always tell you, if your child is nonverbal, teach this way. If your child is a visual child, teach that way, and so on. So that's one aspect. There was another section to the question.
After the assessment, how many hours do we need to work the child?
But you also asked about comprehension, I believe.
Yes, sensory comprehension, theory of mind.
Right, so all of that, the entire cognition curriculum, which is 1/8 of the whole of Skills, is about theory of mind. The entire cognition curriculum addresses perspective taking and theory of mind. There's at least, I want to say, maybe 20 or 30 lessons that are just focused on theory of mind.
And it works.
And they're amazing. I mean,
amazing.
It's a huge focus.
Yeah.
Comprehension is addressed in the cognition curriculum, executive functioning curriculum, and social and language. It's spread in many different areas. So yes, those are, if you're looking for the higher level advanced programming, Skills is it. It's definitely it. Now, the question of how many hours, really the how many hours has to do with a number of different things. For example, it has to do with your child's age. So ideally, you are ramping up if your child is below 3. So you're gradually, with a 2-year-old, it's very hard to do intensive hours because they are tired and they're not used to the regimen. And so you kind of start with, let's say, 15 hours and you gradually increase it so that by the time the child hits age 3, you're doing closer to 40 hours a week of one-to-one therapy. Now, and then depending on your child's deficits. So for example, if your skills profile shows that your child is behind, 2 years behind on all areas of functioning, then you want to definitely be doing 40 hours a week. If your child is one of those children who's just slightly below typical functioning on, let's say, the areas of theory of mind, comprehension, and executive functioning, which are all the planning abilities, then maybe you're looking at more about 20 hours a week, but your child is also in school and they're receiving intervention through school as well. So really, from my perspective, what I would like to say is that if your child has any deficit at all, fill their time. How you fill their time has a lot to do with the deficit. Let's say it's a child who has motor deficits. You're going to want to do a lot of occupational therapy and have focus on that with some ABA. If your child has very significant higher functioning deficits, you're going to be doing a lot of ABA, but you want to make sure your ABA is cognitive behavioral, not just pure ABA, because you want to teach your child things like how to tell jokes and how to lie and how to, read inferences, and all that sort of stuff is cognitive behavioral. So, the format changes a little bit and the hours change a little bit. We tried very hard. In fact, we're still working on a publication called Standards, which is so difficult to establish because the kids are so incredibly different from each other. However, the new DSM, or the DSM-5 that came out a couple of years ago, does help that, because the DSM gives severity level based on symptoms and says if your child needs a lot of support, some support, or little support. And again, I correspond that, I guess, to hours. If your child needs a lot of support, then you should be definitely doing at least 40 hours a week of therapy. If your child is kind of mid-range, then you want to probably not do less than 25 or 30 hours. And if your child is very mildly affected, then you can do something like 15 hours a week. But that's in addition to school and other activities.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very hard, and your provider should be the one that kind of gets to know your child and establishes the hours.
Right. We've got so many questions pouring in. Continuing on with skills questions, we're having issues on yes-no program on skills. Yes-no SD is the therapist presents an object or picture of an object or person and the vocal stimulus. Is this blank? Response, yes or no. But he understands yes or no in another context. How can we approach this? He says yes to all questions, but for sure he knows better. Please help and thank you so much. Sometimes it's that flip in the switch about kids know yes and no.
Yes,
and they know what they know what their desires are,
Right.
what they want and what they
Right.
don't. But they don't understand that yes means yes, I desire that and I want that.
Yeah, so that's a different issue altogether as well.
Then what that is?
Yeah,
Okay,
because
then I
they're
read it wrong.
talking about tacting, you're talking about mending.
Okay.
So they're talking about, is this a person or an
Okay.
object, I think,
Yes, I
right?
think you're absolutely
Is
right.
this mom?
That's why you are the person you are, and I just sit here.
Well, no. But
No, 'cause that you're
they're
absolutely
completely
right.
different things. And
Okay.
it's actually really great that you brought that up, because one of the ways to get the child to really there's two things you can do, because you're working on tacting and you want the child, three things you can do. Hopefully I won't forget them right now.
Okay.
But there's three things you can do. One is you can teach it using all things that would be no. You would start with things that would just provoke the no answer first. So you'd show pictures of objects and ask if it's something else. So the child gets into the modality of no. In other words, you could be having an issue just with discrimination training. Discrimination training involves that random rotation that you can go back and forward and alter from yes to no, no to yes. And sometimes our kids just get stuck with that. And you have to kind of get them back into the mode of saying the other one, and then they rotate better. That's one option.
So you're
you're
mass
showing
trialing
like this.
no.
Yes, exactly. So you're
Okay.
saying, is this a book? And your child say no, and you'll say, is this a pen? And they say no, and is
Right.
this a, so
Right.
you just ask no questions, and then what you'll do is you alter with a yes question a series, and then you start rotating.
Okay, but first you
That's
have to get
one.
them getting it
Getting
right
no
on the
again.
no all the time.
That's right.
When it's appropriate.
Another thing to do to make things easier is to go to 3D objects. So always, it's easier actually, I take that back, but in most cases, for children, it's easier to respond if it's a 3-dimensional object.
It's interesting.
And, that's one prompt. Another prompt is to say, is this a box? Yes. and then your child will model yes, and then you will fade the yes from the question. So you put the answer into the SD. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. And another more advanced way to do this is what you mentioned, which is the manding.
Okay.
You could do a mand prior to doing a tact. So you could teach items that the child wants. So for instance, juice, and you will say, is this juice? And if the child says yes, then you can give them juice. Or you can even say, do you want juice? And the child says yes, and you hold it and you say, is this juice? And they'll say yes. So you kind of prompt the tact with a mand.
Got it.
And you can, we used to do that also with imitation and receptive. You can always do, like if you want to tell a child to clap and they won't know how to clap, you'll say do this, and then they'll do it, and then you'll say clap and they'll do it.
Right.
So it's kind of like pairing two SDs together because one gets the other one going.
Right.
So those types of things are prompts that you can use. And if you're in that lesson and he's stuck, you should get someone to help you with identifying what's the best prompt.
Okay.
But don't be discouraged. Nothing is immediate. You have.
Right.
This is the reason ABA is so intensive, is that you do a million different ways of teaching something. I always used to refer to colors. When you teach colors, you want to teach colors in so many different ways. You teach it receptively so the child can touch blue and white and so on, and then you'll teach it expressively. But when you get to the expressive, you're teaching it as a mand. Do you want blue? You're teaching it as a tact. Is that blue? Or show me the thing that's. But it's all so many different ways, and then you ultimately always want to kind of teach things as an intraverbal. What color is the sky? It's blue. So there's every concept has multiple different ways of teaching, and sometimes abstract concepts, yes and no is one of them. Pronouns is one of them. There's some of these abstract concepts that our kids just get stuck on.
Yeah.
Drop back. It always tell you teaching points. At the end of the lesson, there's teaching points. Drop back, make it more visual, prompt more, use the stimuli that are clearer in distinction, that are easier to respond to, and drop the rotation. Go back to to mass trials of something.
Yes. And just do the yes or no. I think that's going to be really helpful for you.
And what might also help across not just that lesson but other lessons is go to Institute for Behavioral Training, IBT, and look at the module that talks about discrimination training, because that's what you're stuck at, is discrimination training. And there's a 7-step sequence that we suggest that will help our children do discrimination training.
And that's ibehavioraltraining.com. Another person who wrote it and said, Shannon and Dr. Doreen, I'm so excited just listening to you talk about skills. This is
amazing.
Exactly what my teen needs. You're awesome. Another person who says, does skills help with motivation for non-preferred activities?
So that's a really good question. I love that question. I don't know that skills in itself would help with that. I think it helps in the way that it puts things in a particular order, so you don't ever end up doing things that are too non-motivating, because the child has mastered the previous skills. So for example, if I teach a child to clap, and then the next lesson I teach them is something like, something intricate involving their hands, the distance between clapping and that second thing is so difficult that the child won't be motivated to do that. Or they might be different. With skills, it kind of puts things in a certain order that is easy for the child because they've just now mastered the previous thing. Having said that, if you feel something you're working on is not motivating for your child, then you need to change the teaching circumstances right away. You need to increase reinforcers. You need to make it easier for the child to attend. And you need to shorten the duration of each sit-down actual task so that the child receives more reward. You can always fade the reward. I always say you start out with a massive amount of reinforcer and a low-demand task. And so low-demand task gets tons of reinforcer, and over time, you gradually, for that task, you gradually make it a harder and harder, more demanding, and you reduce the reinforcer. And once you get to a level where it's minimal reinforcer and medium level task, you're at normal, right? Normal life. And sometimes we get stressed out because there's too much demand and not enough reinforcer, but we've learned to keep going because we know in the long term there's that reinforcer coming in life. You always want to get the kids to that level, because if you end up doing just a ton of reinforcer for easy tasks and you never move away from that, our kids generally don't want to do it unless they get the big reinforcer. And life isn't like that. Life, you have to keep going, and you have to be able to wait for a reinforcer long term. However, when you first start, this whole concept of learning is foreign, and it's a lot of teaching. And so you really want to make it, in fact, our therapists should be and are spending a lot of time just playing with the kids, there's a part of ABA that you want to condition yourself to be a reinforcer. So, we'll bring toys, we'll really play, have fun, so that the child feels the opposite of when you go see a doctor. You know how our kids are afraid of going to doctor's offices initially. With us, it's like what I want to hear is the children are excited when the therapist is there.
Absolutely. We have to stop.
Sure.
And we have more questions that are coming in. But I do want to say one little quick asterisk for that too, that I do think it's worthwhile for that parent to take the skills assessment, because there are lessons in skills that deal with inhibition and waiting and things like that, that if you see that there is a gap someplace, that those lessons would help your child to be able to attend to a non-preferred activity and help them to wait for the reinforcement.
Definitely.
And we had another person who said, I'm glued to the screen, and they want to know a recommendation about how many programs, but we're going to save that question for next week, so you're going to have to tune in next week. Cliffhanger. We thank you so much. We started talking about skills, and that took the hour, but obviously everybody really was excited about that, and I think that's a really good thing.